This is apropos. It's a key artery for around a fifth of the world's oil and LNG supplies. With tanker traffic in the Strait of Hormuz near a standstill, there are no easy options to keep oil and gas flowing. Tankers set to load liquefied petroleum gas from the Middle East are now being redirected to fill up in the United States. Charlie James has more.
A ship ablaze in the Strait of Hormuz, one of several attacked by Iranian drones in the days since the U.S. and Israel launched their joint operation. On Wednesday, Iran's Revolutionary Guard said it now has full control over this narrow mouth of the Persian Gulf. No ships are passing through.
It is a body of water through which around 30% of global crude supplies are transported, and that is why it is considered to be so crucial. So the threat of setting ships ablaze that was levied by a senior commander in Iran's Revolutionary Guards has sent fresh shockwaves through the markets and seen crude prices rise yet again.
A prolonged blockage of the strait would also cause delays in imports of raw materials and consumer goods, negatively impacting the global economy. In an attempt to avoid such a scenario, France is trying to organize a response.
What President Macron announced is that we will propose to a number of partners that they form a coalition to secure the movement of ships in this region of the world, which is a key hub of international trade.
In other words, France wants to be able to intercept drones and missiles that could threaten oil tankers. It's an idea echoed by U.S. President Donald Trump, who said Tuesday he's ready to use the U.S. military to escort tankers. No one wants to see a repeat of the global crisis caused by the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s. Dubbed the Tanker War, more than 500 ships were destroyed or damaged in the Strait of Hormuz.
For more, we're joined now by Michael Tamvakis, Professor of Commodity Economics and Finance at the Bayes Business School, City University, London. Thanks so much, Michael, for being with us on the programme. Let's start perhaps where that report ended. Donald Trump offering US Navy escorts and insurance in a bid to restart shipping flows and curtail energy prices, of course, very important for Donald Trump. Is this likely to be effective, or are deeper production cuts here inevitable?
I have the feeling that for the time being, it might be a little bit of overstretching of the U.S. Forces in the Gulf. I think they have to split their time between attacking Iran or defending from attacks from Iran and then escorting ships. So I cannot see this happening unless there's even more military action, if you like, in the region, perhaps with the aid of other fleets. So I think for the time being, the only thing in their mind is as quickly as possible to stop Iranians from attacking altogether.
Yeah, because Israel's saying as well that it's going to make it harder for Iran to disrupt vessels in the Strait in the coming days. What do you actually expect it and the US to do about that?
I would say that they will probably try to take out their drones somehow. There were reports today in the press about engaging even Ukrainian anti-drone drones to do that. Possibly also attack any missile silos in order to, at source basically, to cut the ability to be able to send any further missiles towards tankers. Having said that, I think the world right now, the markets rather, are reacting with, I wouldn't say calm, but they're not panicked yet. But I think we need a few more weeks of this going on. We don't need it, but if a few more weeks are actually going to be ahead of us, then we may start see prices really climbing up.
Yeah, obviously we're just 6 days into the war. As you suggest, Michael, there could be a long way to go here. But what kind of toll do you think this disruption could end up having on energy prices if transit halts perhaps almost completely and more production is being shut off?
I think the problem starts with oil, clearly, because this is the biggest commodity. I think an earlier commentator said that about a third of the world supplies of oil come from the Mideast Gulf. I would add a little bit more than that. The Middle East Gulf produces about a third of total production, but if you take it down to export, it actually generates about close to 40% of exports, global exports. Out of the Middle East Gulf, probably about 14 to 15 million barrels per day are exported. And I think at a conservative estimate, I think we might be losing perhaps about 6 of those, which is about 40% of that. There are some alternative options. If the tankers won't move, then some supplies can come out of Saudi Arabia via the pipeline, Petroline, the pipeline that connects the east with the west in the Red Sea. Not all of it can necessarily go towards Asia Pacific, because there is, of course, the Gulf of Aden and the Houthis who may start attacking as well. There is also the pipeline that goes from the Emirates, Abu Dhabi in particular, down to Fujairah. But again, this is a relatively smaller pipeline, about 1.5 million barrels per day. So we may see curtailment of exports from the Middle East Gulf. And I think the main region that is going to be affected is going to be Asia Pacific. So collectively, it should be India, China, and also the OECD economies of Japan and South Korea. Beyond crude oil, there is also products. In recent years in the Middle East, particularly the Emirates, Abu Dhabi, but also Saudi Arabia, have ramped up their refining capacity. So they aim to export a lot more refined products. And as a matter of fact, Europe has been a recipient of these products, and some of this supply may be curtailed as well. But once again, the main target of these product exports is the Far East. And finally, natural gas, which I think is probably going to be the most affected, because there aren't any other alternatives. There aren't any pipelines that can transfer this gas to the final markets. LNG is the only solution. LNG coming primarily from Qatar and going primarily into Asia Pacific, especially China. There are alternative sources. There is Australia, there are the United States, etc. Eventually, this sort of a deficit of LNG exports from the Middle East Gulf is going to filter through to international markets. It hasn't filtered through to US prices of natural gas, but prices in Europe as well as in Asia are already on the rise.
And Michael, you mentioned China and the EU. We've seen Beijing, it's already been concerned seeing energy sanctions, all this geopolitical uncertainty. It's built up its reserves. Is that something that the EU should have been doing? Is it possible for the EU to have done something similar to what China has been doing to try and protect itself from such a shock?
It is possible, but it's very difficult because China is one command and control economy. The EU likes to think that they can operate all together, but they are 27 different countries with different priorities. Some of the EU countries do not rely that much on either gas or oil. Others do, a lot more. So clearly, I think some of these countries are going to put forward their national interest rather than the collective EU interest. I think one example of how you can stock up on these commodities are the storage of natural gas. The storage of natural gas right now in Europe is quite low because we are at the end of the winter, which in a sense is also good because consumption of gas for heating spaces is not going to be that high. But it also poses a problem of if you replenish the stocks right now, this is going to be expensive, whether it is gas or whether it is oil. So it's a difficult question, because if the EU buys any more oil and gas, it is going to start pushing inflation up, which is another problem with which we have fought in a few recent years. And I don't think they want to start funneling the flames of inflation once again.
And Michael, we're obviously very early into this conflict. We don't know how the situation is going to escalate over the coming weeks. What kind of impact, though, is it possible to say at this point, is this likely to have on consumers? Presumably, all the additional costs that we're seeing piled on here, they're going to be eventually passed on. Absolutely. Right now, the price of the commodities have increased, but consumer goods have remained stable simply because there are already stocks available. I think once we go beyond the 1 month in the conflict, if we go to that far,
forward, some of these prices are going to start filtering through. Oil, of course, is extremely important for transportation. We may have not seen the prices at the pump increasing, but already the prices for jet kerosene for aviation have skyrocketed. So transport, travel in general is going to be more expensive. Ultimately, oil is used in a number of different goods, including, of course, petrochemicals, plastics, and so forth. Natural gas is particularly important as well because it is used extensively not only in heating spaces, it is also used for electricity generation. So expect higher electricity prices, especially where gas is used to produce the last kilowatt hour in an economy. And also in all sorts of other industries, including chemicals, fertilizers, food processing, smelting metals, and so forth. So if this conflict goes on, eventually, give it perhaps a quarter, and all these higher prices for gas and oil are going to start filtering through the economy, and eventually inflation, and possibly an economic slowdown.
And just finally, Michael, do the Gulf states, do they have a buffer here, thanks to their geography, obviously the fact that many of them are oil producing themselves and they've made investments in this area?
Buffer in terms of energy supplies, you mean, or
Yeah.
in terms of any other consumer goods?
In terms of
energy supply. In terms of the energy supplies, well, they do have stocks in the ground, pretty much. I think the key question there is if they get hit, if their production facilities get hit, then they have a problem. As long as the production facilities are intact, then they can keep on pumping and storing. The worrying thing is that the Iranian missiles are also targeting refineries, like the one in Ras Tanura. This is a problem because it means the supply of what we actually use in terms of oil, the refined oil products, may be disrupted, but also, as I said, natural gas before. And natural gas is still used extensively in the region, together with oil, to generate electricity. It's probably almost 50-50. The two commodities are used to generate electricity. So hopefully there are enough reserves of both in order to maintain some sense of normality in these economies.
Michael, thanks so much for being with us on the programme. We'll have to leave it there for now. That's Michael Tamvakis, Professor of Economics and Finance at the Bayes Business School, City University, London.